I'd like to welcome you here today. My name is Brigid Bright. I'm the Associate Executive Director of CASE. CASE is the Council of Administrators of Special Education. We are a membership organization whose mission is to advance the field of special education through professional learning, policy, and advocacy. So this is the professional learning piece. We love to partner with our corporate partners that have really great content and provide great information to both our members and non-members. I'll be introducing our friends at Let's Go Learn in here in just a moment, but I do want to share the other side of our mission as far as policy and advocacy, that if you are not familiar with CASE, I encourage you to visit our website. I'll put some links in the chat here in just a moment, but we do have an action center that is our advocacy outreach, and we have current action alerts. So if you are interested in advocating on behalf of special education, we would welcome you to access that information. It's completely free. You can advocate. It takes about 3 clicks in 5 minutes. There's also phone messages if you'd rather call to represent and advocate on issues in special education. But we just definitely want to have a collective voice for administrators during this time of great change federally. The other thing I'd like to share with everybody is next month we are having our in-person law conference, the CASE Academy of Law and Leadership, which is April 22nd through the 24th in St. Louis, Missouri. That's also on our website, so please take a look at that. And now, as I do all my CASE plugs, let me please introduce Richard Capone and his team from Let's Go Learn, who are going to share how using data to make decisions across tiers is helpful for districts. Richard, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bright. So first of all, I do want to say CASE is an incredible organization. If you are not a member of it, it makes a lot of sense because why reinvent the wheel? You have your peers who are doing the same thing as you are, being able to collaborate, and it's great. So that's why we're members and we support CASE extensively. Also, what I'm really excited about today's topic is that last week was CEC, and Aimee presented there, and it was standing room only. I mean, we had so many people register for their behavior session. People were sitting on the floor and standing. So this is a hot topic. And for us as a company, many of you may know or may not know that we are hardcore precision diagnostic assessment and math and reading. But our customers have always said, hey, well, what about behavior, right? Because students can't learn math and reading if you don't have a positive environment at your schools. And that's why we built up this whole area with Aimee and a whole team. Now, they're going to be talking a lot about the framework and what you need to do. But also, we're starting to work on the technology side. I do think there is so much happening with technology. Technology can support it, right? If you have a good framework and you have good processes, technology can make it easier. You don't want to be passing around sticky notes. You don't want to have to worry about people. Did they fill out the form properly? This is where technology is really great. So as far as maybe the next slide, Aimee Dupree is a former EC special education director, and she has tremendous amount of experience. She also was a principal. She's been, site leader, so all different positions. And so she has hands-on experience rolling up the sleeves. Aimee Adams, has been a district coordinator, behavior specialist, autism specialist, working in large scalable implementations, which again is why it's so important for all of you. So today, the third webinar in the series, it's really about operationalizing change in behavior and creating positive school outcomes. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you guys. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to hear what you have to say today.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Dr. Bright. We are excited to be here today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. So today is the last of our 3-part series, and our focus today is going to be on using data to make decisions across tiers. And what we want to do is look at the types of data that can be collected and how that data that is collected speaks to the health of the systems within your MTSS behavior framework. So I'm going to take a minute and review. In our first session, we discussed knowing that a change needed to occur and that being overwhelmed with all of the data points and information we routinely get regarding behavior It was those data sources that spur a district or a school to make those significant changes to their behavior systems. And we discussed that this is knowledge that creates a knowing and a doing gap. So we know something needs to change, but knowing where to begin is really often the first hurdle. So we outlined in our first session how to begin to tackle the doing side of the knowing and doing gap, and that the doing side is truly the operationalization of the systems that are within your building. Aimee, could you skip 2 slides up, please? In our second session, we shared the importance of a team, and we discussed that making all of the necessary decisions within the MTSS framework is too much for one person, and that it takes a team to start to build the staff's collective efficacy around behavior so that you're ensuring fidelity of the system in each tier. And so in both of our 2 sessions, we centered around making really big changes. And the fact that those changes are truly often a matter of creating fundamental paradigm shifts for staff within buildings. And so the biggest paradigm shift that we've really discussed within our first 2 sessions has been internalizing behavior systems in the same manner that we do for academics. So educators typically have a really strong grasp of the systems within their buildings that address academic gaps, and they know how to intervene and how to interpret that data, how to problem solve as a team, and doing the same thing using the same lens for behavior within the MTSS framework is really the biggest paradigm shift that there is to make. And our first 2 sessions focus on establishing the systems that support reframing how a school views behavior and how the school collects data around it. So when you think about making these big paradigm shifts, the biggest one to make truly is looking at the MTSS framework and this triangle with the same lens with behavior so that you're intervening and instructing just like you do with the academics. So when you think about the MTSS framework, it requires data to be collected. And just as with academics, we're going to be pretty adept at using the data to drive instructional decisions and knowing what data points at each tier actually mean. So today we're going to talk about what to do with all of the behavior data that you collect, the different kinds of data that are collected, and how to ensure that the data that you're collecting is actionable and reliable. So just like the academic side, each tier brings its own data set, and each data set provides important information for the behavior problem solving team to take action on. When we're thinking about paradigm shifts that we've discussed so far, the last major paradigm shift for schools becomes how to use data within the MTSS triangle for behavior. There is so much data available. It's imperative that we focus on what data is salient and purposeful. You can almost get lost in all of the data that's available. So how your behavior problem solving team utilizes that data becomes a whole other system that needs to be considered for each tier. Additionally, when you think about data, we're not just talking about student data, we're also talking about staff data. And so are we truly looking at how adults influence the students, and is that influence that the adults have resulting in positive changes? We see that when students learn academic skills, teachers really are able to own that movement and that gain from the student. Teachers feel responsible for that. But the paradigm shift here is that teachers own and feel that same responsibility for the behavior shaping that teachers have, that students have when they make those changes. We want teachers to feel just as much ownership on the behavior side as they do the academic side. And it's really the data that's going to drive those decisions. So we've talked a lot about the knowing and doing gap with respect on how to get started and why you need to build a team. But once you get that clarity of action and those systems in place and that team in place, all of that data sort of shifts then to the action side. So all the data and information that can prompt an administrator to know that change needs to happen transfers. It transfers over to the action side. So you've almost got a brand new knowing and doing gap. And once that data is moved into action, it moves and becomes the driver for the decisions for both students and staff. And it's going to inform you what to do with students within your tiers. And it also informs you about what is or isn't working systemically within a building. So we have a wide variety of data sources that are going to inform team decisions, specifically regarding students. And discipline data is really the biggest data set that we often look at when we consider moving students from core to supplemental or to intensive interventions. And the hope is really that the discipline data that's collected is done with fidelity, because you now have systems in place for collecting that data. We also look at academic performance. Do we see a sudden spike in grades where they've just dropped, where they're typically an A/B student and all of a sudden they're down failing D's and F's possibly? Do we have a particular attendance gap where things are going well and then we see an attendance slide off for them? Did something happen at home? Can we problem solve through any attendance anomalies that we see? It's important to have students be part of a self-assessment system where they're listening to, or they're providing feedback about who they are, what they like through inventories. Teacher observations are important. What are the things they see outside of just hard numbers? And then parent input. Once we start collecting data at a tier 2 or a tier 3 level, we really need to have parents or guardians and other significant people in that student's life at the table too, since they're the ones who have the most knowledge of the student. So behavior problem solving teams really review a wide variety of data sources to understand student behavior patterns and make really informed decisions about specific interventions. But like I said, we don't want to just look at student behavior. There are two types of data that are going to really impact behavior. We often focus on the student data, how many suspensions, how many office referrals, how many phone calls home, how many disruptions or fights, all of those types of data pieces. But the reality is that there's staff data too, and it is that staff data that matters just as much as student data. Staff behavior often directly influences student data. So are we truly considering how the adults in the building are influencing the students, and is that influence resulting in positive changes? We talked about our core behavior assessment tool, and we shared that in our first session, and how that really provides a lens through which teams can review the influence of the adult behaviors on the students and the systems that are in your building, and are they working with fidelity? And when we intervene academically, teachers and staff, we want them to, again, be confident that the gains and improvements are a direct result of their work and their influence on students. So we want to have that sense for both academics and behavior. And teachers and staff most definitely impact that student behavior, and we've got to ensure that we're looking at that data piece alongside the individual student data piece, so that what we're collecting can really help shape adult behaviors and student behaviors alike, because we want to ensure fidelity and sustainability within our buildings. So again, we've talked a lot about paper processes, paper implementation in buildings, and maybe you have a process implementation, but the single thing that truly drives paper and process implementations to performance is data, and knowing what is salient and using that data to drive our decisions, and how data is used creates performance and really transforms school behavior systems within an MTSS framework. We want it to become how you do business.
So your behavior problem solving team is heavily involved in decisions for tiers 2 and tiers 3. After your initial implementation phase, where the behavior problem solving team is supporting those system levels decisions, they spend most of their time involved at tier 2 and tier 3 decision making based on data. They are reviewing entrance rubrics to see if a student qualifies for additional support, moving from tier 1 to tier 2 or tier 2 into tier 3. or if the student is ready to decrease support because they have learned new skills and the targeted behavior has finally been extinguished. They are looking at individual student data and making decisions about the need to revise plans or intensify interventions. They are using that data to help align interventions with the function of that target behavior. As part of this process, the behavior problem-solving team is also reviewing that data to ensure fidelity of implementation. Are the adults in the building implementing those evidence-based behavioral supports consistently across teachers, classrooms, and time? The behavior problem-solving team becomes a team of individuals who can receive targeted professional development that they can then share back to that larger school community in order to help build capacity, and data drives that process. Data plays a crucial role in reducing disproportionality in school discipline by bringing objectivity and fairness to the decision-making process of behavior problem-solving teams. By using data effectively, behavior problem-solving teams can move away from subjective decision-making and identify areas where practices might unintentionally disadvantage certain student groups. And here's how data usage can help achieve that. Promoting fair interventions and making needs-based decisions by focusing on the behavior itself and the underlying reasons behind it, rather than demographics, ensures interventions address the root cause of the problem behavior, not simply that student's identity. Data-driven individualized behavior plans are tailored based on specific student data, ensuring that those interventions are culturally responsive and appropriate to each student's needs and learning styles. That monitoring and accountability piece comes through with tracking those interventions for effectiveness. Data allows those behavior problem-solving teams to track the success of interventions across different student groups. This helps identify approaches that work effectively for all students and adjust interventions that are not yielding those positive results. Identifying systemic issues allows that data analysis to reveal broader school-wide issues that might contribute to disproportionality. For example, a lack of culturally relevant curriculum materials or inadequate support for students with learning disabilities may be contributing factors. Data analysis shouldn't replace the importance of understanding a student's background and experiences. Qualitative data from teachers, parents, and the student can provide valuable context to complement that quantitative data that we collect. So you want to avoid data for the sake of data, meaning collecting and storing large amounts of information on a student without a clear purpose or actionable goal in mind. Essentially, you're just gathering data simply because it's available, rather than using it to solve a problem or gain meaningful insights. Do we really need a minute-by-minute, play-by-play for Johnny? No. Once we have data that's relevant, we have to use that data. That's that knowing and doing gap. We want to make sure that we're bridging it, that we don't just know about the problem and admire it, but that we're actually moving ahead to solve that problem. So we want to use our data to identify patterns and trends. You can see with that data underlying triggers or issues. This information can help inform your targeted interventions and support. We want to be able to evaluate those interventions. Behavior data ensures that the strategies are working and that students are receiving the appropriate support. When we base our decisions on data that's collected, teachers increase the effectiveness of those classroom management strategies, interventions, and supports. It ensures that decisions are informed and are evidence-based. Data also helps support collaboration and communication. It can be shared with parents, administrators, and other stakeholders to facilitate that collaboration around student support. Accountability and transparency are the other side of the fence when we talk about behavior data. It can help ensure that the teacher is demonstrating the effectiveness of those implementations that are being used in the classroom. So when we look at data at the core level, some of our sources that we use are our core behavior assessment tool, which provides a standardized objective data on school behavior support practices. Remember that CBAT includes interviews, which offers insights into both the teacher's and the student's perspective on behavior. Data from those interviews provides a qualitative perspective on the fidelity of your implementation. As school leadership, you may have determined a school-wide behavior matrix and taught those components to your teachers and your students. But how do you know if those concepts are being put into practice with fidelity? Have your stakeholders internalize that information and made it a part of how you do business in your school? Or is there a need for review, support, or maybe even professional development around those core practices? The data from the core behavior assessment tool interviews and observations can support answering those questions. Those environmental checklists help us identify potential triggers for behavior problems in the school environment in order to create that more positive learning. Majors and minors are something that most of us track, along with suspensions, and that provides that quantitative data on behavioral incidents. But you want to make sure you're using that data to identify patterns and trends. Most of your behavior incidents happen across a certain grade level, in a certain classroom? Are there any areas of disproportionality as that data comes through and you're now analyzing it at the core level? Student information helps to provide that context for understanding a student's behavior. Perceptual data from your stakeholders is really important because that provides a well-rounded view of the school climate and individual student experiences. This data offers valuable insights into the social emotional climate and the individual student experience, which helps with creating buy-in from all parties that are going to be involved in this MTSS process. All of this data combined allows school staff to make informed decisions about the best course of action for each student, which is the core of an MTSS process. In essence, these data sources work together to create a comprehensive picture of student behavior, allowing schools to provide targeted and effective interventions. Initially, data at Tier 2 is used to identify who are your Tier 2 students and what types of supports do they need. Again, we're going to dive back into that individual student information to provide context, attendance, academic performance, really looking to understand those behavior patterns, especially when it's paired with individual student behavior data that offers that specific details on frequency, intensity, triggers, which allows for targeted interventions that match that student's needs. When you look at the number of students being referred to Tier 2 and by whom, you highlight which students are struggling and which staff members are identifying behavioral intervention or behavioral issues. This data can also point to areas where additional training for staff may be needed because it's not just that student side of the fence we're supporting. We also need to look at our teachers and staff. Intervention tailoring and monitoring happens when we use this intervention data trends to show the effectiveness of current Tier 2 interventions. And it facilitates the allowing for adjustments to interventions that are not producing our desired results, especially when combined with that observation data and environmental data that can help pinpoint environmental factors that may be contributing to those behavioral issues. This data informs adjustments to the environment to better support student behavior. All of this data allows for that data-driven decision-making, especially at Tier 2. It allows the team to make informed decisions about which interventions to use and when to intensify or fade those interventions. By tracking intervention data, the team can see which interventions are working and which are not. This allows for the team to improve the effectiveness of those Tier 2 interventions. In essence, this data allows school teams to move beyond those general assumptions at core and to develop highly effective support plans. It ensures Tier 2 interventions are responsive to specific needs of our students, and it provides a system for ongoing evaluation and improvement, leading to better outcomes. At Tier 3, this is when a student within that MTSS framework has reached that intensive individualized level of support, and data collected here becomes incredibly granular and crucial. Individual student data becomes the foundation. It includes a comprehensive history of the student's behavior, academic performance, attendance, and any other relevant factors. In Tier 3, this data is used to identify very specific patterns, triggers, and contributing factors to the student's challenging behaviors. This allows for the creation of highly individualized interventions. When we look at that intervention data, we want to track the student's response to previous interventions, particularly those in Tier 2. In Tier 3, this data will help determine what has and hasn't worked, preventing the repetition of ineffective strategies. It also allows for very close monitoring of the student's progress with the current intensive interventions that are in place. When students move into Tier 3, this data indicates that Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions have been insufficient. It triggers a more thorough assessment process, often involving your multidisciplinary behavior support problem-solving team, which signals the need for more intensive resources and support. There needs to be a process and standards for when a student qualifies for Tier 3 and when they're ready to move back down into Tier 2. That FBA and BIP data is for behavior intervention plans and those functional behavior assessments. It is essential in Tier 3. FBA data helps to identify the function of a student's behavior or the why are they engaging in it, while that BIP data outlines the specific strategies that will be used to address that behavior. What are the skills gaps that we need to teach in order to create that positive behavior change? This data is constantly reviewed and adjusted based on the student's progress. At some point in the Tier 3 process, the team may decide to consider the need for specially designed instruction, or EC referral data. EC, or Exceptional Children's Referral Data, indicates that a student may have a disability that is contributing to their behavior. This data triggers an evaluation process to determine eligibility for special education services. If the student is eligible, an IEP, or Individualized Education Plan, will be developed, which will include specific behavior goals and interventions. Data helps to make sure that the student is receiving all of the needed services and protections that are afforded to them. Key roles in Tier 3 is that individualization. Tier 3 is all about highly individualized support. The data helps create a plan that is tailored to that student's specific needs. Tier 3 is also about intensification. Data helps to determine the intensity of the interventions needed. This may involve more frequent check-ins, one-on-one support, or other intensive strategies. Data at Tier 3 also facilitates collaboration. Tier 3 often involves a team of professionals, including teachers, counselors, administrators, specialists, and the data helps to facilitate communication and collaboration among those team members. Progress monitoring is essential. In Tier 3, progress monitoring is very frequent and very detailed, and that data helps to track a student's progress and making adjustments to support our changes to those plans as needed. The data provided provides the necessary information to develop and implement effective Tier 3 interventions that address unique needs of each individual student. So when we start to look at intervention data, the fidelity of data input equaling the fidelity of that data output becomes really highlighted. The adage garbage in, garbage out rings especially true when analyzing individual intervention data for student behavior change. Meticulous data input encompassing frequency, count, rate, duration, latency, intensity, severity, magnitude, antecedents, behaviors, and consequences directly translates to the fidelity of data output, which in turn dictates the effectiveness of our behavioral interventions. Each of these data points provides a unique and vital piece of the puzzle, allowing educators to understand the nuances of a student's behavior. For example, knowing the frequency and rate of a behavior helps determine how often it occurs, while duration and total duration reveal how long it persists. Latency highlights the time between a trigger and the behavior, and intensity, severity, and magnitude help to quantify that behavior's impact. Without accurate and consistent recording of these elements, the resulting analysis will be flawed, leading to misrepresentations, misinterpretation, and ineffective intervention. Furthermore, contextual data, including antecedents and consequences, are essential for understanding the function of a behavior. Accurately noting the events that precede and follow a behavior allows for the identification of triggers and reinforcers. This information is critical for developing targeted interventions that address the root causes of that behavior, rather than merely treating the symptoms. If the data is inconsistently or inaccurately recorded, the functional analysis will be compromised, and the interventions may inadvertently reinforce the problematic behavior. By contrast, detailed and precise data input allows for the creation of a comprehensive behavioral profile, revealing those patterns and trends that might otherwise go unnoticed. This level of detail enables educators to tailor interventions to the specific needs of the student, ensuring that they are both effective and efficient. Ultimately, the fidelity of data input directly impacts the fidelity of data output, which in turn dictates the efficacy of behavioral intervention. When educators commit to consistent and accurate data collection, they create a robust foundation for data-driven decision-making. This rigorous approach supports the development of targeted, evidence-based interventions that promote positive behavior change. By ensuring that the data is accurate, reliable, and comprehensive, educators can confidently use it to monitor student progress, adjust interventions as needed, and ultimately improve your student outcomes. This investment in high-fidelity data collection is an investment in the student's success, ensuring that interventions are informed by accurate and meaningful insights. The triangle and the assessment tool work in concert to create this cycle of determining, teaching, and implementing, which causes stakeholders to be engaged. Once your systems are implemented, you should have engagement, and engagement creates data. You should have data on those majors, those minors, those suspensions, your behavior intervention plans and progress monitoring, and that data becomes your points of engagement and our checkpoints for your team to determine the fidelity of your systems. Data is designed to evaluate your students' success in the tiers. It is also designed to determine the health of your core practices. Your systems should be strong enough to create reliable data regarding student behavior in your building, but they should also be adjusted when data shows that systems are not working.
Thank you. So let's talk for just a minute about administrator data. So, and how an administrator would engage with all of this. First of all, you have to remember, as the administrator, you've got the overarching vision for your building. And so you know what all the data sources are across all the areas within your building, not just behavior, but academics, everything. And so you're the person who truly understands the full complement of the data that you have, and you've got to determine then how all of this behavior data then fits in the additional cogs of the wheel. So as you analyze that, and as the behavior problem solving team analyzes that, it's like we've talked about, you have the student data piece, but you also have the staff data piece. And so where you see those gaps with understanding how interventions work, or how intervention data should be collected, or progress monitoring, all of those things may need additional support. So your data might reveal that you need to do some training for your staff. So you'd have to call on outside folks to come in and support that training and have a plan that's clear. It also might guide some foundational changes. Maybe you've got systems in place, but those systems are not used with fidelity across your building. So maybe you have to walk back to the teach area of core and reteach your staff some of the parts of the framework. So as the administrator, you have to understand all of that data and then really facilitate training or change needs as they occur, because ultimately your goal is to ensure sustainability. You want systems to be in place and functional across a wide spectrum of people, so that you have that staff that interchanges in and out every year, that ultimately your systems are sustainable. And same for your students. You don't want them having to relearn systems every year. And you're also the one who has to facilitate that alignment. You want alignment between your MTSS process on the academic side and the behavior side. And you want that also to be aligned with your school improvement team. So you, again, have that total vision of your building and how you want to do business, and how you want that alignment to look across all of your groups of stakeholders. And then lastly, none of that can happen if you're not a participant. So as the administrator, as the sign says on the desk there, the buck stops here. The buck stops with you. You are the ultimate decision maker and driver behind all of the systems in the building. So it is imperative that you are part of the behavior problem solving team, just as you're part of the academic problem solving team. So whether you're at that paper implementation stage or the process implementation stage, using data is truly going to be the key that's going to move you to performance implementation. So what I mean by this is if you think about the diving progression of these images here, it's like the paradigm shifts that are being made when you align your behavior systems in schools to the MTSS framework. Once you know changes need to be made, you begin to create that vision and you develop a team. And then your data drives your decisions and your adjustments accordingly. So the diver there on the right, at some point in her life, although she's got a beautiful dive right now, she was the diver on the left. She was using floaties. Then somewhere along the way, with some practice, she became brave enough to flip backward, and eventually, through the support of a systematic approach, the support of a team, the utilization of data, she became able to perform at this really high level. And so as leaders, as administrators, and as behavior problem solving team members, it's going to take time to move a school from paper implementation and process implementation all the way to high performance. But it is data that makes those adjustments possible. And it's the thing that moves you. It is the catalyst. So it is definitely a process, but it is truly attainable through operationalizing the systems and using the data to move the needle in your buildings. So ultimately, we've talked a lot about paradigm shifts over the past 3 sessions, and it's these paradigm shifts that are true breaks with an old way of thinking. You have to break with your old ways of doing business, and oftentimes that's hard. In the rush of the day, when situations require you to immediately respond, we fall back on the things that feel comfortable, the things that we're used to. So making these breaks and implementing new systems and new ways of thinking requires us to truly break with our old ways. So we hope that you've gained insight on how to begin to make these shifts within your own teams and where to begin to align behavior systems to an MTSS framework. And these past three sessions have been that kind of that 30,000 foot view of how to operationalize behavior in each tier. But we hope you might join us at one of our upcoming professional learning opportunities if we've piqued your interest at all. If you're unable to attend, though, you're welcome to reach out to us. We are available to consult with you about any of your individual needs and also to provide some tailored support as you embark along your journey. We recognize these learning opportunities are just around the corner, really in just a couple of weeks. So we hope that you will be able to possibly send a team and come and hang out with us for a few days when we'll dive deeper into all of the topics that we have covered in these past 3 sessions. But if not, hey, let's connect. We are here for you, and we are happy to provide you some consultation time, some tailored support, and help you walk through the knowing and doing gap and help you make that bridge. So thank you to everyone for joining us, and thank you to Dr. Bright for her time today. And we'll turn it back over to both Richard and Dr. Bright.
We've got some questions.
Oh, great.
So also, this is being recorded, so we will be sending you the recording later. Let's see here. And then there are some participant questions. So here's one question. This is a good one. What type of data do you think is the most predictive to help prevent problems before students escalate to tier 2 and 3?
Well, gosh. Oh, go ahead, Aimee.
I would say the data that you glean from our core behavior assessment tool, because that data allows you to quantify all of your core systems from tier 1 through tier 3. So it really lets you assess the health of your core implementation, and to ensure that you're in that fidelity of implementation where you're in that process, or excuse me, that performance phase. It's really hard to quantify some of those things, and our core behavior assessment tool, I feel, gets really granular into that, and that will let you know if things are healthy at core. You're not going to have all of your too many kids up at tier 3 or too many kids in that tier 2.
So, Aimee, to qualify, the core assessment tool is looking at the sites and how well they're implementing the plan and how well everyone, in some sense, at a school level or building by building is on board, right?
Correct.
Okay, super. How can we bolster our teacher observational data collection?
If you mean on a student or the data that we collect on teachers.
I'm not sure, but my impression was that was more like on, because you were talking about teacher observation in the very beginning, that slide about the different type of data, discipline, academic performance, teacher observation. I'm thinking maybe they're talking about teacher observation on students.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One, if you're collecting data within your core system on majors and minors accurately and not letting your emotions override any of your data collection, but pulling that out of it and just looking at the behavior for the sake of the behavior, the less emotion that you put into it, the more accurate the behavior collection is going to be regarding the student. And it's important that when teachers are reporting data, that they remove those emotions from that report.
Well,
So,
sorry, I was going to chime in. That's actually what you guys are building, or we're building at Let's Go Learn, is a mobile app so that you can impartially collect data on students, expected, unexpected behavior, minor, major, and it's going to be a matrix that's determined by your school. So you may say, well, when we do a minor, we have a rubric, right? And so I think that's the way of doing it, right? It's not that, oh, it was very bad. It's scale of 1 to 5, and it's defined, right? So that's something that we're going to do, right? We don't want sticky notes, right? Or someone saying, hey, Richard's doing blah, blah, blah. It should be, okay, here's an app, click, 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 submit.
So I think, Richard, you hit the nail on the head, which is that consistency across environments, right? Are we all speaking the same language? Do we all view disrespect as the same definition when you're in different classrooms or you're moving through school buildings? And again, that equity of implementation that often an app or a process puts in behind is what helps ensure that we're not hitting on those disproportionality issues.
Right. Here's another one. How can building level leaders develop the skills needed to lead behavior as you described?
well, one way would be to attend one of our professional learning sessions. That truly breaks down a lot of the skills and required to address the obstacles as they arise in each of the tiers, and how to operationalize things at core, systems at core, collection tools at core, teacher obstacles at core. We walk through a lot of that as well. So working with the folks, working with us is important to help develop those skills. Additionally, I think one of the things that Aimee and I are always available to do is to problem solve with you specific individual situations. Not everybody has the same obstacles, so walking through those individualized accounts in your building or something else that we can do to help.
So I think
sorry. No, go ahead, go ahead.
Aimee and I spent a lot of time diving into implementation science and what creates and supports change at a large scale in business, in schools, and healthcare facilities. And one of the main drivers of implementation success is having what they call a change agent. That's that expert who you can go to when you have questions, when you encounter roadblocks, when you think you're trying to do all the things that the textbook tells you to do, but for some reason it's not working. So, that's one of of the things Let's Go Learn can do is to act as that agent of change and to be your expert that you have in your pocket so that you can give us a phone call and we can help you, like Aimee and Richard have said already, to problem solve through some of those barriers to success.
So in other words, it could really be a la carte, right? Like sometimes someone may already have a framework in place and maybe they have a document that guides it, but then they need like, hey, how can we bolster this? How can we change it, upgrade it? Yeah, and then sometimes it's nice to have a third party. One thing I want to add, I know in the Arizona conference that's coming up real soon, there's a lot of teams coming from the local areas. So I think it's not only hearing from you guys, but it's also about networking and saying, hey, what are you doing at other districts, maybe in my state? And then there's a Florida event too. So I think it's going to be sort of interesting for people to get together and collaborate.
I know Aimee and I learn something every time we do one of those professional learning events too.
Yeah, I was going to say everybody brings something to the table. Everybody has something that's already in place that does work in their building. So you're not really necessarily always reinventing the wheel. We want to capitalize and leverage on the things that you do have happening in your building that are successful and move from there. And so everybody brings something that's already in place to the table, even if it's little swimmer floaties. They bring that to the table.
All right, here's another question. So if you outlined a lot of data needs and why it is important, how do we figure out the process for defining the data collection and its review? Is there a framework document from which we can start?
Yes, our core behavior assessment tool is the primary data collection tool that's going to support where your data collection is strong and where it's weak. Yes, that tool gives you an overview of things that are happening in your school, but some of the things that are happening in your school lie within the behavior problem solving team, and that's how do you collect data at the tiers. So that is one piece that's happening. And you just mentioned that we're in the process of building an app. So we want that app to be the next phase of data collection because you've got to do it for your school and for your students. And so working to collect data on students with fidelity is the other part of our app that's upcoming.
Here's another question. Who evaluates tier 2 and 3 data at school levels? Is it a school level specialized team or is it a district team who works with the schools? Obviously, it depends. I'm assuming this is a district with many sites.
Yeah, that it should be happening at the school level, especially if it's a district with many sites. A district team wouldn't be able to handle the volume of what comes through. Plus, as Aimee was saying about that administrator's role, like it really takes that building administrator who understands the culture and understands the goals and understands the drivers within that individual school building to really wrap that out. Now, that's not to say that it is not very helpful to have the support of district level staff in those behavior problem solving teams at the school level. So maybe there's a district level behavior specialist that plugs in at each of those individual school behavior problem solving teams to be that change agent who has that expertise in their pocket. Maybe there is another district level administrator that's requiring some fidelity to process in using that assessment tools to and requiring schools to have school level behavior problem solving teams. I think we mentioned this in our last webinar that we did, but one of the biggest indicators of success oftentimes when we're trying to help support the paradigm shifts in the schools that we work with is the presence of a true school level behavior problem solving team. They're who really makes the magic happen on the ground, who knows their kids and who has those relationships with the families and their communities.
Plus, as you work together as a team, you're building that synergy and that collective efficacy within your building. And so when you're all wrapped around the same idea, it's a lot easier to make those transformational changes and to assess yourself fairly and say, okay, we need to make these changes versus a district level team coming in and saying, this isn't or that isn't. Then you're sort of doing what you're told versus determining for yourself. So I think that also matters on where a particular building is. Sometimes districts do have to come in and say, make these changes, but it really should be the day-to-day operationalization of it within the building, as Aimee has said.
This gets back to you always need really good principals and assistant principals, don't you? I
Yes, you
always
do.
feel
I was
like
just thinking that, Richard. So had my previous life's administrator hat on thinking, and the administrator's role is to kind of hold the team's feet to the fire, knowing
Mhm.
that change needs to be made, or that you're really looking through the lens of the hardcore data, not emotional, not those things, and also not allowing the team to sit around and shrug and say, well, we tried everything, because never have we ever tried everything, right? So
Mm-mm.
that's perfect, Richard. That's exactly what I was thinking.
yep, good principals. So send them to the professional learning events, right? They should be coming there too. Or if you have, yeah, interesting. I don't see, there's a couple different places. Let me just check the chat. Okay, looks like we don't have any more questions. Anyone want to have a last word?
Well, I do want to do a quick plug if you all don't mind. We were logging on this webinar, the Let's Go Learn team and myself, and we were talking about, we were just at the CEC convention last week. That's what it felt like last year. And that's the Council for Exceptional Children. So CASE is a division of CEC, and currently CEC is offering free membership for all as part of their advocacy drive. So I am linking that right now in the chat. So if you are interested in joining CASE, while CEC is doing this free drive, you can join CASE for only $60. So that would be a great place to look. There you go. Thank you, Richard. You can see that you join there, and then you would add CASE as a subdivision. So this is a great opportunity to do so. And I would add that I really appreciate this behavior series and partnership with Let's Go Learn. The assessment tool that you're offering and the follow-up is fantastic. We appreciate that for members, and we appreciate that for the field of education. So thank you all very, very much for joining us today. And again, this is being recorded. The previous sessions in the series were recorded as well, and all will be posted on the CASE website. Richard, do you have them posted as well?
Yeah, we'll have them on our YouTube channel, and then I think we've been a little tardy because last week was CEC, but we will send out an email to anyone who's registered with all three links too.
So if you have colleagues that you're thinking, man, I really need to share this with other people in my state or people within your district leadership, feel free to share this information far and wide. And again, we appreciate your attendance and have a wonderful rest of your day.